She said not to tell you, because you wouldn't understand grown-up money things. My 8-year-old whispered it like a confession. I stared at the crayon drawing in my lap, our house, our family, and flipped it over to see her message. They took my piggy bank. But it was worse than that. My in-laws didn't just steal her birthday money. They stole her college fund, forged my dead husband's signature, and rewrote his will to erase me. They thought I'd smile and slice pie while they gutted our future. But I keep every receipt, every file, every signature. And Lily? She told the truth. Now I have 6 weeks, and their own pride will bury them. My name is Emily Kincaid, and I'm 45 years old. Since Tom's funeral 18 months ago, I've built a careful routine around Lily's school schedule and his parents' Sunday dinners. The kitchen counter always holds their latest casserole beside Lily's crayon drawings on the fridge, their version of normal. Tom's mother Margaret slides in little comments about proper financial planning, while his father Robert's eyes narrow whenever I mention Lily's college fund. What they don't know is that my brother Mark spent 20 years in forensic accounting. My filing cabinet holds every receipt, every trust document, every email they've sent since Tom passed. Even their text messages sit, organized in dated folders. I maintain my pleasant smile at dinner, pass the potatoes, and keep my voice steady. Some might mistake my calm for weakness. But let me start from the beginning. That Sunday started like all the others since Tom died. I laid out the good plates, the ones with the blue flowers that Margaret had given us for our wedding. The afternoon sun caught the polished silver just right, making shadows dance across the hay. Tablecloth. 6 o'clock sharp, as always. You know that hollow feeling when something's off but you can't put your finger on it? That's how I felt, watching Lily arrange her napkin for the 100th time. Usually she'd be chattering about school or showing off her latest art project, but tonight she barely looked up from her lap. "Everything okay, sweetie?" I asked, adjusting the centerpiece. She nodded, but her fingers kept fidgeting with the paper she'd folded into neat quarters. I could see crayon marks bleeding through. The doorbell chimed right on schedule. Robert and Margaret bustled in with their usual casserole and critiques about my gardening. "Those hydrangeas need more attention, Emily," Margaret said, hanging up her beige cardigan. "And really, dear, you should trim back those roses." The tick of the grandfather clock in the hall seemed louder than usual as we settled into our seats. Lily pushed her peas around her plate, her eyes darting between her grandparents and me. Finally, she slid the folded paper across the table. "I made this for you, Mommy," she whispered. The outside showed our house, all bright yellows and blues, with 4 stick figures holding hands in front. Typical Lily artwork. She always made the sun wear sunglasses, but when I flipped it over, my stomach dropped. In her careful 2nd grade, handwriting were 4 words that made my blood run cold. They took my piggy bank. I managed to keep my hand steady as I set down my fork. "Lily, honey, would you help me get the salt from the kitchen?" In the hallway, away from the clinking of silverware and Robert's story about his golf game, I knelt down to meet her eyes. "Can you tell me what happened to your piggy bank?" Her lower lip trembled. "Last Tuesday, when they were watching me, after school, Grandma and Grandpa said they needed to count my money to make sure I was saving right." She twisted the hem of her dress. "They poured everything into a plastic bag. All my birthday money and the dollars from the tooth fairy. Did they say anything else?" I kept my voice gentle, though my chest felt tight. "Grandma said it was better off with them." Lily's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "They said not to tell you because you wouldn't understand about grown-up money things." From the dining room came the sound of Margaret's laugh, that precise, measured sound she used at church socials. I could picture her dabbing her lips with her napkin, everything proper and controlled. I wanted to march back in there and demand answers, but that would only spook them, make them defensive. If they'd taken Lily's piggy bank money, what else might they have accessed? No, this needed a careful approach. "Thank you for telling me, sweetheart." I smoothed her hair. "You did exactly the right thing. We'll fix this, I promise." Back at the table, I fixed my smile in place while Margaret served her apple pie. Robert talked about the stock market while I cut perfect triangles of crust, already composing my first question in my head. I'd wait until after dessert, keep my voice level, give them a chance to explain. But watching them sit there, so smug and certain, made me wonder what else they thought they could take from us. After dessert, I sent Lily to the living room with her crayons. "Why don't you draw something nice for Grandma and Grandpa?" The words tasted like vinegar, but I kept my tone sweet. In the kitchen, Margaret was already running water for dishes. Always had to show me the proper way to clean up after dinner. I dried my hands on a dish towel and cleared my throat. "We need to talk about Lily's piggy bank." Robert leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "Ah, so she mentioned that, did she?" "Yes, she did. She says you emptied it last Tuesday while babysitting." I kept my voice steady, though my fingers tightened on the towel. "Care to explain why you took her money without asking me?" Margaret turned off the tap, her bracelets jingling as she dried her hands. That superior little smile of hers made my teeth clench. "Emily, dear, we're teaching her about sharing. Children need to learn these lessons early." "Sharing?" The word bounced off the kitchen tiles like a dropped plate. "You mean stealing." That was her money, birthday gifts, tooth fairy savings. Now, Robert waved his hand dismissively. "We're her grandparents. We know what's best for her future. Tom would have wanted us to guide her financial education." I grabbed the counter spray and a cloth, needing something to do with my hands. "Tom would have wanted you to ask permission before taking his daughter's savings." Each swipe across the granite was slow, deliberate. "Don't lose it, Emily. Keep your head." "Really, Emily?" Margaret's voice dripped condescension. "You're making such a fuss over a child's pocket money. We're investing it properly, something you clearly need help understanding." The cleaning cloth squeaked against the counter as I pressed harder. "Return it. Tomorrow." They exchanged that look I'd seen too often lately, the one that said I was being difficult, unreasonable. Robert shrugged. "We'll consider it. But honestly, Emily, you need to trust us more with these decisions." After they left, I waited until Lily was asleep before pulling the step stool to her closet. My hands shook as I reached for the shelf where I'd stored the savings envelopes and bonds Tom had left for her education. The manila envelope felt too light. Inside, 3 bonds were missing, and the cash envelope had been opened, resealed sloppily. In my bedroom, I stared at the phone for a long minute before calling Mark. My brother picked up on the second ring. "Em, everything okay?" "No." I sank onto the edge of the bed. "Remember those concerns you had about Robert and Margaret? You were right." I told him everything, the piggy bank, their dismissive response, the missing bonds. His sharp intake of breath told me this was worse than I'd thought. "Emily, listen carefully." Mark's accountant voice kicked in. "All business now. Small thefts like this, they're usually just the beginning. It's about control, testing boundaries. Have you checked all your accounts? The trust paperwork?" "Not yet. I was waiting until—" "Don't wait. First light. Tomorrow. I want you to pull every document, every statement from the past year. Scan everything and send it to me. I've seen this pattern before. They're probably counting on you being too embarrassed or overwhelmed to fight back." A chill ran through me. "You think they're planning something bigger?" "I think they're already doing something bigger. We just need to find it." He paused. "And Em, don't confront them again until we know exactly what we're dealing with." After we hung up, I walked to my dresser, where Tom's photo stood in its silver frame. He was laughing in that one, taken at the lake house the summer before his diagnosis. I touched the glass gently. "I won't let them take her future," I whispered. "I promise." The tremor in my hands wasn't just anger anymore. It was fear mixed with determination. Dawn couldn't come soon enough. I couldn't sleep past 4 a.m. The kitchen was dark and quiet as I started the coffee maker, its gentle gurgling the only sound besides Lily's soft breathing down the hall. You know that creeping dread when you know something's wrong but can't put your finger on it yet. That's what had me up before dawn, spreading paperwork across the dining room table like I was planning a military campaign. The familiar scent of coffee steadied my nerves as I lined everything up. 3 blacks, binders of trust documents, a stack of bank statements, and the accordion file of savings bonds Tom had so carefully arranged before. My hands traced the neat tabs he'd labeled in his precise engineer's handwriting. God, I missed his organization. Okay, Emily, I muttered to myself, uncapping a red pen. Start with what you know. I grabbed my day planner and began marking every time Robert and Margaret had watched Lily in the past 6 months. Tuesday afternoons, occasional Friday evenings when I had late meetings, and of course those Sunday dinners. Patterns started emerging pretty quick. Small withdrawals from Lily's accounts within 48 hours of their visits. Never big enough to trigger alerts, just a steady drip of disappearing money. Have you ever noticed how betrayal has its own timeline? Looking at those dates lined up, I could see exactly when they'd started, testing the waters, getting bolder each time I didn't notice. The morning light was creeping through the windows when I heard Lily stirring. I quickly stacked the papers and got her ready for school, trying to keep everything normal. Extra syrup on your pancakes today, sweetie? I asked, and her smile nearly broke my heart. She had no idea what was at stake. After drop-off, I dove back into the paperwork. By noon, my eyes were burning from squinting at account numbers and legal footnotes. That's when I heard the mail truck. You know that moment in movies where everything slows down? That's what happened when I saw that official envelope from Meridian Trust. My fingers trembled as I tore it open right there by the mailbox. The word "frozen" jumped out in bold letters, and I swear the ground shifted under my feet. Lily's tuition trust, the one thing I thought was absolutely secure, was suddenly inaccessible. I had to grip the porch railing for a minute before I could walk back inside. Next month's tuition payment was due in 6 weeks. Without that trust money, the call to the trust officer was a lesson in frustration. I'm sorry, Mrs. Kincaid, but there's an administrative hold pending co-trustee clarification. Her voice was professional, detached. I can't provide any additional information until the review process is complete. Co-trustee? I pressed. I'm the only trustee. My husband made that very clear. I understand your concern, but I can only tell you that we've received documentation requiring review. My legal pad filled up with notes as she spoke. Names, dates, reference numbers. Every detail might matter later. After hanging up, I spent the next 2 hours scanning everything into PDFs for Mark. Every document, every statement, every scribbled note went into that email. Around 3, I checked on Lily napping in her room, clutching the stuffed penguin Tom gave her on her last birthday with him. 6 weeks. That's how long we had until the next tuition invoice. 6 weeks to figure out what Robert and Margaret had done and how to undo it. I stood in the doorway, watching her sleep, and felt something shift inside me. You reach a point where shock has to turn into action, where fear has to become fuel. Today was that day. My phone buzzed, Mark acknowledging receipt of the files. I took one last look at Lily and walked back to the dining room. The scattered papers waited like pieces of a puzzle I had to solve, and I would solve it. Had to. Time to stop reacting and start fighting back. I met Mark at his office around 7 that evening. The place still had that familiar smell of coffee and printer toner that always clung to accounting firms. Remember those old-school desk lamps with the green glass shades? Mark had one casting shadows across the scattered papers while we hunched over his desk. "Look at this," he said, tapping a document with his pen. "Filed 2 weeks ago. Lists Robert and Margaret as co-trustees." He slid another paper next to it. "And here's Tom's original signature from the trust formation." He pointed between them. "See the difference?" I leaned closer and my stomach dropped. Tom's real signature had this distinctive loop in the T. He'd joke it was his engineer's flourish, but on the new document, that loop was missing entirely. Someone had tried to copy his signature, but they'd missed that detail. "They forged it," I whispered, my fingers tracing the fake signature. "They actually forged their own son's signature." Mark nodded grimly. "And they did it smart, filed in multiple jurisdictions, created a paper trail that'll take time to untangle. They've been planning this, Em. You know what's worse than discovering a betrayal? realizing how long they must have spent plotting it. We started making calls right away. The county clerk's office first, then the trust administrator, then the bank. Each time, we hit the same wall. Process takes 30 days minimum. Need to verify jurisdiction. Have to route this through our legal department. Please, I said to the fourth person who transferred me. This affects my daughter's school payment. I understand, ma'am, but I'll need to transfer you to our specialized department. More hold music, more wasted time. Each transfer eating up precious minutes while Mark's office grew darker outside the windows. Around 9, Mark grabbed his whiteboard marker. In big red letters he wrote, "Tuition due, 6 weeks," and underlined it twice. "They're using bureaucracy against us," he said, capping the marker. "Every delay works in their favor. We need to document everything. Every call, every conversation, every time they dodge a question." I pulled out my phone. "I'll record everything from now on." Legal in our state with one-party consent. Mark had already checked. Good. He started pacing, something he always did when thinking hard. They're confident, right? Now, Em. Maybe too confident. People get sloppy when they think they've won. The streetlights flickered on outside his office window, casting long shadows across the desk full of evidence. I walked over and closed the blinds. Didn't need anyone seeing our late-night strategy session. "You know what really gets me?" I said, sinking back into my chair. "Their pride, the way they acted so superior about teaching Lily about sharing. Like they had some moral high ground while stealing from their own granddaughter." Mark stopped pacing. Pride. That's their weak spot. He tapped the whiteboard. 6 weeks isn't long, but it might be enough if we can get them talking. People love to brag about how clever they are. I thought about all those Sunday dinners, all their little comments about proper family stewardship. Their smugness had always gotten under my skin. Now maybe it could work for us. "I need to stay calm," I said, more to myself than Mark. "If they see me angry, they'll close ranks. But if they think I'm helpless," I let the thought hang there. Mark gathered the papers into neat stacks. "Document everything. Play confused if you have to. Let them think they're winning." He handed me a legal pad filled with his notes. "And Em, be careful. People who forge documents don't like getting caught." I nodded, my mind already working on how to approach them next. Their pride had always been their biggest weakness. Maybe it was time to let them show off just how clever they thought they were. The following Saturday, I walked into my sister-in-law's house carrying a casserole I'd barely touched while making it. My phone was already recording in my jacket pocket, testing my nerve with every step. You ever try to act normal when your whole body's screaming that this isn't normal at all? That's what it felt like, balancing that dish while nodding at relatives like everything was fine. I'd positioned myself near the kitchen entrance where Robert and Margaret, my in-laws, always held court during these gatherings. Cousin Rachel was there, hanging on their every word as usual. I busied myself arranging deviled eggs on a serving plate, keeping my movements slow and deliberate. "The thing about money," Robert was saying loud enough to carry, "is knowing how to direct it properly." He had that tone he always used when dispensing his financial wisdom. "Can't let sentiment cloud good judgment." Margaret chimed in. "Exactly. We've been redirecting some funds lately, making sure everything's properly managed." She lowered her voice, but not enough. "You know how emotional young widows can get about these things." My hands trembled slightly as I aligned the eggs in perfect rows. I wanted to turn around and confront them right there, but Mark's words echoed in my head. "Let them talk. Get it all on tape." "But I thought Emily was handling things?" Rachel asked. Robert's laugh made my skin crawl. "Oh, she thinks she is, but we've got a better plan. Can't let all that money get wasted on sentimental ideas." I picked up my empty tray and walked to the other side of the buffet, circling back for a second. Pass. Had to make sure the recording was clear. "The trust fund," Rachel whispered. "Among other things," Margaret said, "we're protecting our son's legacy. Emily would just—" She made a fluttering gesture with her hands. You understand. I did another lap around the buffet, my heart hammering so loud I worried it might be picked up on the recording. But I kept my face neutral, even managed to smile at Uncle Pete as I passed him. Later that night, I sat at my kitchen table with Mark, both of us staring at his laptop screen. He'd pulled up 6 months of banking records, creating a timeline that made my blood run cold. See these transfers? He pointed to a series of transactions. They align perfectly with their babysitting dates. Small amounts at first, then bigger ones once they had account access. I checked the timestamps against my phone's recording. The dates match when they were bragging about redirecting funds. Mark nodded grimly. And look where the money's going. He pulled up another screen. 3 accounts we've never seen before, all opened within the last year. I started labeling everything meticulously, each file, each transfer, each timestamp. My hands were steady now, finding comfort in the methodical organization. This was something I could control. RK transfer 0922, I muttered, typing. MK audio 1005. Good, Mark said. Document everything. We need to show patterns. By midnight, we had a complete file structure. Audio clips matched to bank records, dates aligned with their babysitting schedule, and a clear trail of money moving to those mystery accounts. It wasn't just random anymore. This was proof of deliberate action. I sat back in my chair, letting out a long breath. This connects their words to their actions, doesn't it? Mark nodded, already drafting an email to his contact at the law firm. We've got the bridge we needed. Their own words, their own transactions. He looked up at me. You did good today, Em. Keeping calm like that couldn't have been easy. I thought about those moments at the buffet, pretending to fuss with deviled eggs while my in-laws bragged about stealing from their granddaughter. Wasn't easy, I admitted, but worth it. Mark scheduled a morning call with the lawyer, attaching our carefully labeled evidence. I watched him type, remembering Margaret's dismissive hand gesture when she'd talked about me. They thought I was too emotional to handle money, too sentimental to notice their scheme. But they'd forgotten something important. Being methodical isn't the same as being cold. And being sentimental doesn't mean you can't also be smart. I spent 3 days shuffling between the courthouse and copy shop, filing papers until my fingers went numb from paperwork. Each time I thought we had everything perfect, the clerk would find some tiny issue, a missing initial here, a wrong date format there. You ever try to fight bureaucracy? It's like trying to nail Jell-O to a wall. I'm sorry, Mrs. Kincaid, the clerk said, for what felt like the 100th time. But Section 4B needs the original notary stamp, not a copy. She slid the stack back across the counter. My stomach clenched. Another day lost. Another $75 filing fee down the drain. The tuition deadline wasn't moving, but these paper walls kept getting higher. That weekend, I found myself doing something I never thought I would, driving around to open houses. The real estate signs seemed to mock me from every corner. I parked outside a ranch-style home with peeling paint, checking the listing price on my phone. If I sold our house fast enough, maybe at a steep discount, I could cover Lily's tuition and the mounting legal fees. The thought of leaving our home, the one where Jack and I had raised Lily, where his laugh still seemed to echo in the hallways, made me physically ill. I remembered the day we'd painted the kitchen sunshine yellow, how he'd gotten more paint on himself than the walls. How could I put a price tag on memories? But what choice did I have? The legal system was drowning me in red tape while my in-laws played their delay game. My daughter's future was worth more than yellow walls and echoes. Mark found me at my kitchen table that evening, surrounded by real estate listings and half-drunk coffee. He took one look at the papers and his face fell. Emily, no, he said, pulling out a chair. You're not selling. I don't see another way. My voice cracked. Every time we file, they find some technical problem. The tuition's due in less than 4 weeks now. I can't. I stopped, pressing my palms against my eyes. Look at me, Mark said. He was flipping through the trust documents, moving with purpose now. There's always another way. We just need to. He stopped, jabbing his finger at a dense paragraph of legal text. Here, read this. I squinted at the fine print, trying to focus through my exhaustion. Section 7.3. In the event of mishandling or breach of fiduciary duty by any co-trustee, the court shall conduct immediate review and may order full restitution. Immediate review, Mark repeated. No administrative delays, no jurisdictional runaround. If we can prove they've mishandled funds, we can force them into court. I sat up straighter, feeling the first spark of hope in days. And we have the recordings. Plus the transfer records. Mark was already pulling out his laptop. We just need to authenticate Jack's signatures, match up the dates of their transfers with their babysitting schedule, and show they breached their duty as trustees. I grabbed a legal pad, my hand flying across the paper as I wrote. Step 1, signature authentication. Step 2, timeline of transfers. Step 3, document the breaches. Now you're thinking like an accountant, Mark said with a grin. I got up and found a red marker, then walked to the calendar above the stove. We were starting week 4 of our 6-week deadline. I circled it firmly, the red ink bright against the white paper. 23 days, I said. Can we do it? With every scrap of evidence we've gathered? Mark was already typing. We can do it in 20. I spent the next hour copying all our recordings and documents onto a thumb drive, making sure every file was backed up. Down the hall, I could hear Lily's soft breathing as she slept. I promise you, I whispered, clutching the drive, they won't take your future. Not $1 of it. The determination in my voice surprised me. It wasn't the hollow bravado of earlier weeks. This was different. For the first time since finding Lily's crayon note, I didn't feel like I was drowning. I had a ladder now, each rung carefully labeled, authenticate, align, document, prove. Time to start climbing. You know those moments when the ground shifts under your feet? When something hits you so hard, you can actually feel your world tilting? That was me last Thursday morning, standing in my bathrobe with a courier envelope in my trembling hands. I hadn't even made coffee yet. The doorbell rang just as I was reaching for the filters, and there it was. A thick manila envelope with one of those pull tabs across the top. Inside was what looked like a copy of Jack's will. But something felt off right away. The paper was too crisp, too new. Then I saw it. Or rather, didn't see it. My name. My name wasn't anywhere in the document. You ever try to breathe normally when your chest feels like it's in a vice? I had to sit down right there at the kitchen counter, spreading the pages out next to yesterday's mail. There was Jack's signature at the bottom, but even that looked different. I dug through my memory box, the one with all his birthday cards and anniversary notes, and laid them side by side. No, 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 I whispered, pulling out my phone. I snapped a quick photo and sent it to Mark with 3 words, "Get here now." While I waited, I made myself focus on the little things, the tick of the kitchen clock, the smell of the neighbor's fresh-cut grass drifting through the window. Anything to keep from screaming or throwing things. Mark arrived in record time, still in his gym clothes. "Show me," he said, not even bothering with hello. I pointed to the spread of documents on the counter. He pulled out a magnifying glass, because of course my brother the accountant carried one, and started examining the signatures. "Look at how the K connects in Jack's real signature," he said, circling it with his finger. "Now look at this one in the will. See how it's more angular, like someone tried to copy it?" I leaned in closer. They traced it? Badly. Mark was already scanning more letters. The pressure points are all wrong. Real signatures flow. These letters look like they were drawn carefully, one piece at a time. My hands clenched into fists. So they didn't just steal from Lily's piggy bank. They're trying to write me out completely. "They're getting desperate," Mark said, still examining the documents. "This kind of forgery, it's amateur hour. They might as well have used crayon." But I barely heard him. I was thinking about all those Sunday dinners, all those seemingly kind offers to help with Lily. Had they been planning this from the start? Testing how much they could take, piece by piece? I needed air. I grabbed my coffee and went out to sit on the porch steps, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of purple and gold. The same view Jack and I used to share, back when the world made sense. But as the darkness settled in, something else clicked into place. If they were desperate enough to try such an obvious forgery, they must have made other mistakes too. Big ones. I went back inside and found Mark surrounded by papers. "We need 2 piles, I said, pulling up a chair. "Everything with Jack's real signature goes here." I tapped the counter on my right. "Everything suspicious goes there." I pointed left. "Already on it." Mark held up another document. "Look at this trust transfer from last month, same weird K as the will." For the next hour, we sorted through everything: bank forms, property records, trust documents. The suspect pile grew faster than I expected. They'd been busy, my dear in-laws, but they'd also been sloppy. "First thing tomorrow," I said, checking my phone. "I'm calling Angela." She was a notary I knew from my banking days. "We need sworn statements about these signatures while the evidence is fresh." "Good thinking," Mark nodded. "The more official eyes on this, the better." I stacked the piles neatly and slipped them into separate folders, blue for real, red for forged. My hands weren't shaking anymore. Instead of panic, I felt something closer to clarity. They hadn't just given me proof of their theft. They'd handed me a roadmap of every legal mistake they'd made along the way. You know those old spy movies where they shine light through paper to match signatures? Mark and I did something similar, except we used my phone's flashlight and a stack of documents spread across my dining room table. It was nearly midnight, but neither of us could sleep knowing what we'd found. "Hold it steady," Mark said, positioning the will signature over a bank form. "See that stutter in the J? It's like they lifted their pen, trying to figure out the next stroke." I shifted the light slightly. "There, same hesitation on this trust document from last month." We worked methodically, the way Jack had taught me to organize his case files back when we first married. The memory of him at this same table, surrounded by legal papers, made my throat tight for a moment. But I pushed through it, focused on the task at hand. Mark pulled out a fresh legal pad and drew a grid. "Let's break down every flaw," he said. "Date, document type, specific errors." He started filling in columns, irregular loops, pressure points where the pen had pressed too hard, spacing that didn't match Jack's flowing style. "Look at these dates," I said, pointing to a cluster of transfers. "They all line up with when they were watching Lily." The betrayal felt fresh again, thinking how they'd used their grandparent time as cover. You ever notice how some tasks that should be depressing actually end up making you stronger? That's how I felt as we built our case. Every forged signature we identified was another brick in the wall we'd use to protect Lily's future. Around 2 a.m., I started organizing everything into a proper dossier. First went the audio recording from the family gathering, their smug voices bragging about redirecting funds. Next, Mark's detailed map of every suspicious transfer, color-coded by date and amount. Finally, our signature analysis, with clear photos showing the forged versus genuine examples. "We need to tell the story simply," Mark advised, rubbing his tired eyes. "No jargon, no emotion. Just facts any judge can understand." I nodded and started typing. On date, defendants assumed unauthorized control of trust assets through forged documents. The words flowed easier than I expected, probably because I'd rehearsed this narrative in my head 1,000 times while lying awake at night. The sky was starting to lighten when we finished. I made fresh coffee while Mark did one final review of the package. "This is solid," he said, tapping the stack of papers. "Really solid." My lawyer's office opened at 8. I was there at 7:30, pacing the parking lot with the dossier tucked under my arm. When Sarah, my attorney, arrived, she didn't even look surprised to see me. "The court opens at 9, she said after reviewing everything. "I'll file this personally." I sat in her office while she prepared the formal documents, watching the clock crawl toward noon. Every minute felt like an hour, but I forced myself to stay calm. This wasn't the time for rushing. At 11:45, Sarah returned with stamped copies. "Filed and recorded," she said, handing me the receipts. "The court has everything." Back home, I composed a brief email to the trust officer. Please be advised that evidence of fiduciary breach has been filed with the court. Case number. I kept it professional, resisting the urge to add any emotional context. After hitting send, I stood in my kitchen, holding the copy of our dossier. All those hours of work, all that evidence of their betrayal, wrapped up in one thick folder. I placed it on the highest shelf in my office, right next to Jack's old law books. The refrigerator hummed in the quiet house, steady as a heartbeat. 6 weeks until Lily's tuition was due. 6 weeks to see if justice still meant anything in this world. I switched off the kitchen light and let my eyes adjust to the afternoon sun streaming through the windows. The same sun that had watched me trust them, watched them steal from us, and now watched me fight back with every scrap of evidence I could gather. 2 mornings after we filed, I nearly missed the court clerk's letter mixed in with the usual junk mail. My hands shook a little as I tore open the envelope right there by the mailbox. You know that moment when you're hoping for good news but bracing for bad. That was me, standing in my driveway while Mrs. Henderson walked her poodle past. Investigation opened, I read, letting out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Then my eyes landed on the hearing date, and my stomach did a slow roll. They'd scheduled it for May 28th, just 2 days before Lily's tuition deadline. Have you ever tried to measure the distance between hope and panic? It's about the width of a calendar square. I spread everything out on the dining room table that evening after Lily went to bed. The familiar smell of printer ink and coffee kept me company while I worked on my witness notes. Mark had drilled this into me. Be thorough but concise. Stick to facts, dates, and documents. The next morning, I packed Lily's lunch like always. Turkey sandwich, apple slices, and a little note with a smiley face. Some days it felt surreal, keeping up these normal mom routines while this legal storm brewed in the background. But that's what moms do, right? We hold the world together, one sandwich at a time. 7 times 8? I quizzed her over breakfast. 56. She beamed, proud of getting it right. That's my girl. I kissed the top of her head, breathing in the smell of her strawberry shampoo. These moments kept me anchored when everything else felt like shifting sand. Later that day, I made the call I'd been dreading to the school bursar. My voice stayed steady as I explained the situation, legal proceedings, trust fund complications, request for a grace period. The silence on the other end lasted 3 heartbeats. We'll note your file, she finally said, but we need confirmation of payment by the 1st of June. Back at my desk that night, I labeled another set of exhibit tabs. Yellow for bank statements, blue for trust documents, red for the forged signatures. The colors helped keep my thoughts organized when everything else felt like chaos. Mark stopped by with takeout Chinese around 8. You're doing everything right, he said, watching me arrange timeline printouts. The evidence is solid, but the timing, I started. I know. He handed me an egg roll. Want me to check the court schedule again tomorrow? Every morning, I found myself lingering at the mailbox. You'd think in this digital age, important news wouldn't come on paper anymore. But there I was, hoping each day for that one envelope that might speed things up. The calendar on my kitchen wall seemed to mock me. I'd drawn a red circle around June 1st weeks ago. Tuition due date. Now, looking at it while washing breakfast dishes, I counted backwards. 5 days. 5 days between us and that deadline, and still no ruling from the court. Lily's piggy bank sat on her dresser, repaired but empty. I caught her looking at it, sometimes, and it broke my heart a little each time. What do you tell a child about justice when you're not sure it's coming yourself? That evening, I added one more tab to my binder, a printout of Lily's most recent report card. Not because it was evidence, but because it reminded me what we were fighting for. She'd gotten all A's in math. Just like her dad, her teacher had written in the comments. I stood at the kitchen window, watching the sunset paint the sky pink and gold. 5 days. The same window where I used to watch Jack pull into the driveway, where I now watched for the mail carrier, had become my counting station. 5 days to see if all our careful documentation would matter. The answering machine blinked with a message from the school office, probably another reminder about the tuition deadline. I left it unplayed. Some messages can wait until morning. My phone buzzed at 6:17 a.m., jerking me awake from a fitful sleep. I'd gotten into the habit of keeping it right by my pillow. Probably not the healthiest thing, but these weren't exactly normal times. You know that moment when your eyes are still adjusting to the screen's glow, but your heart's already racing? That was me, squinting at the court clerk's email. Pursuant to filing 2022 CV 4891, temporary suspension of co-trustee access, pending formal hearing. I read it 3 times to make sure my caffeine-deprived brain wasn't playing tricks on me. The court had frozen my in-laws' access to the accounts. It wasn't a full victory, but it was like someone had cracked a window in a stuffy room. I could breathe a little easier. My fingers trembled slightly as I forwarded the order to the trust officer, making sure to copy mark. 7:03 a.m. timestamp. Every detail mattered now. I was pouring my second cup of coffee when the landline rang. Remember when nobody important ever called landlines anymore? That changed fast. Mrs. Kincaid? The voice was professional, practiced. This is David Chen from the Herald Tribune. We noticed a filing regarding alleged financial misconduct involving your daughter's trust fund. My coffee cup froze halfway to my mouth. The local paper. Of course, court filings are public record. I appreciate your interest, Mr. Chen, I said, keeping my voice steady, but I can't comment on ongoing legal matters. We understand. Can you confirm the hearing is scheduled for the 28th? I glanced at the calendar where that date was circled in red. That's correct. And the allegations involve your in-laws serving as unauthorized co-trustees? The court documents speak for themselves, I replied, using one of Mark's favorite phrases. After hanging up, I leaned against the counter, letting the implications sink in. This wasn't just about money anymore. Once the story broke, reputations would be on the line. In a town our size, news like this travels fast and sticks around long after the headlines fade. Have you ever noticed how differently people treat you once they think they know your secrets? I spent the afternoon at the dining room table spreading out our evidence. If reporters were sniffing around, we needed our facts lined up like little soldiers. I created a 1-page summary for each exhibit. Dates, dollar amounts, documented conversations, clean, clinical, no emotion, just math. Mom? Lily appeared in the doorway, clutching her math workbook. Can you check my homework? Of course, sweetie. I cleared a space among the papers. Watching her work through fraction problems felt surreal. This normal moment floating in our not normal life. Later, I stood in front of my closet, deliberating. The navy blazer seemed right for court, professional, but not showy. I hung it on the closet door handle, smoothing out an invisible wrinkle. In the kitchen, I wrote out Lily's lunch note for the next day. Great job on your math test. Love, Mom. Simple things matter most when everything else gets complicated. Back in my bedroom, I set 2 alarms, one for 5:30 a.m., another for 5:45. No chances. Then I sat on the edge of my bed, watching the minute hand on the old clock Jack had given me tick forward. Each click brought us closer to the hearing. The reporter's call kept replaying in my mind. Tomorrow's paper would probably have something, even if it was just a small mention. By the time we walked into that courtroom, everyone would know. I picked up my phone one last time to check the email was still there. The court order glowed back at me, real as ever. Temporary suspension of co-trustee access. 6 words that might just save us. The clock on my nightstand read 10:42 p.m. In less than 12 hours, I'd be walking into that courthouse. I touched the blazer's sleeve one more time, straightened the stack of lunch notes on the counter, and double-checked both alarms. Sleep wouldn't come easy, but that was okay. I'd learned that some nights aren't for sleeping. They're for counting minutes and holding your breath. The courthouse steps were already slick with morning dew when I arrived. Mark met me at the entrance, his leather briefcase stuffed with exhibits we probably wouldn't need. Sometimes just having backup plans helps steady your nerves. You know that moment when you're about to step into something big and time seems to slow down? That's how it felt, pushing through those heavy wooden doors. Widiawi, courtroom smelled like furniture polish and old law books. I'd been in there twice before for jury duty, but this time the room felt smaller, more intimate. Our attorney nodded from the plaintiff's table while my in-laws and their counsel whispered urgently near the back. Remember how I mentioned keeping every receipt, every email? Watching the clerk wheel in that evidence cart, I finally understood why my obsession with details had been worth all those late nights. The bailiff called us to order, and Judge Martinez adjusted her glasses, diving straight into the signature grid Mark had prepared. Her eyes narrowed at the comparison points, those tiny tells where rushed forgery betrays itself in hesitation marks and unnatural curves. These variances appear systematic, she said, tapping the overlay sheet. Mr. Harrison, please explain the trust officer's findings. Our trust officer, Mr. Chen, approached the podium. He'd always been polite during our phone calls, but today his voice carried an edge of professional disappointment. Your Honor, standard procedure requires original grantor authorization for co-trustee designation. Our review indicates these submissions circumvented multiple verification steps. I kept my spine straight, eyes forward, though I could feel my in-laws' stares burning into my back. Their attorney, Mr. Walsh, shuffled papers with shaking hands. Your Honor, if I may. Walsh's voice cracked slightly. This is clearly an administrative confusion. The intent was to preserve family assets. Judge Martinez held up one hand. Counsel, are you suggesting that repeated signature forgery constitutes mere confusion? The courtroom fell so quiet I could hear the wall clock ticking. Walsh tugged at his collar. She lifted the audio transcript next. I have reviewed the recorded statements regarding fund redistribution. Combined with these transfer records, she shook her head. This court finds clear evidence of fraudulent filings and breach of fiduciary duty. My hands were trembling under the table. Mark pressed his knee against mine, our old signal from childhood that everything would be okay. The court hereby revokes all co-trustee claims, Judge Martinez continued, and orders immediate restitution of diverted funds plus administrative costs. The trust officer will oversee correction of all affected accounts. She signed the order with 3 sharp strokes. We're adjourned. Have you ever felt relief hit you so hard it makes your ears ring? I gathered my papers slowly, methodically, just like I'd practiced. No rushing, no gloating. When I turned toward the door, my in-laws had already vanished into the hallway. David, Chen from the Tribune was waiting outside, notebook ready. Mrs. Kincaid, the judge's ruling was quite definitive. Would you care to comment? The court's findings speak for themselves, I said, stepping aside as the clerk emerged with copies of the order. I watched Chen scan the document, his eyebrows rising at certain passages. He'd have his story ready for the afternoon edition. Small-town papers move fast when scandal breaks. Back home, I refreshed the Tribune's website every few minutes until the headline appeared. Local Family Trust Dispute Reveals Pattern of Forgery. The article laid out everything. The manufactured co-trustee status, the fund diversions, the damning audio evidence. Clean, factual reporting that would echo through every coffee shop and grocery store in town. I printed 2 copies, one for our records, one for that special folder where I keep things Lily might want to understand someday. My phone buzzed with a text from Mark. Done. I stared at that single word, letting it sink in. 4 letters that meant Lily's future was secure again. The calendar on my desk showed tomorrow's date circled in red, tuition due. For the first time in weeks, seeing that deadline didn't make my stomach clench. The next morning, I pulled into the school parking lot just as the maintenance crew was unlocking the front doors. The early September air had that crisp feel that always reminded me of new notebooks and freshly sharpened pencils. You know those moments when you're about to do something you've rehearsed 100 times in your head? My hands were steady as I pulled the cashier's check from my purse, but my heart was doing little flips. The bursar's office still had that same worn leather chair where I'd sat through countless payment discussions over the past few weeks. Mrs. Peterson looked up from her computer, and I caught the slight widening of her eyes. She'd probably seen the Tribune article. "Good morning, Mrs. Kincaid," she said carefully. I placed the check on her desk. "Full tuition payment, as promised." Her shoulders relaxed as she processed the payment, probably as relieved as I was to put the whole situation behind us. While she worked, I pulled up the new trustee documentation on my phone and forwarded it to her office email. "You should see the corrected trust designation in your inbox," I said. "All the proper authorizations are restored." The printer hummed, spitting out my receipt. "Everything appears to be in order," she said, sliding the paper across her desk. "Thank you for your persistence in resolving this." Walking back to my car, I heard the first school buses rumbling up the drive. Lily would be in class soon, tackling multiplication tables and vocabulary lists, completely unaware that her educational future had just been cemented. Back home, I spread newspaper across the kitchen counter and pulled out the superglue. Lily's piggy bank had been sitting in my closet since that Sunday dinner, its broken seam a constant reminder of what we'd been fighting for. The ceramic pieces fit together perfectly. It had been a clean break, at least. Remember when I mentioned keeping everything? As I held the pieces steady, waiting for the glue to set, I thought about all those carefully filed papers that had brought us to this moment. Sometimes the most powerful weapons are just ordinary things, preserved at the right time. I placed the piggy bank on the sunny windowsill above the sink. The morning light caught its glossy pink surface, making the repair line almost invisible. Within an hour, it would be strong enough to hold coins again. At my desk, I wrote 2 thank you notes, one to our attorney and one to David Chen at the trust office. Professional, warm, but not effusive. The kind of notes that acknowledge help without dwelling on the drama that made it necessary. Have you ever labeled a new file folder and felt like you were closing a chapter in your life? I smoothed the restored label onto a fresh manila folder, then carefully arranged the judge's order, the Tribune article, and the tuition receipt inside. The folder fit perfectly in the filing cabinet right behind Family Trust Original Documents. My phone buzzed with an email from the trust office. Restitution processing initiated. Prior authorizations nullified. Simple bureaucratic language that meant my in-laws could never touch Lily's money again. The school day flew by in a blur of ordinary tasks: laundry, grocery shopping, answering work emails. But every time I passed the kitchen window, I'd glance at that piggy bank catching the sun and feel a little surge of satisfaction. At 3:15, I pulled into the school pickup line. Lily bounced out the front doors with her backpack swinging, just like always. But today felt different. Today, we were truly secure. "How was school, sweetheart?" I asked as she climbed into the car. "We learned about ancient Egypt. Did you know they built the pyramids without any machines?" I smiled at her enthusiasm in the rearview mirror. Some things, like a child's excitement over new discoveries, should never change. Back in our kitchen, I lifted the piggy bank down from the windowsill. The glue had dried completely, making it as solid as the day Lily first received it. "I fixed something that belongs to you," I said, placing it in her hands as we stood by the window. The afternoon sun warmed our faces as she turned it over, examining the barely visible seam. "It's all better," she whispered. I wrapped my arms around her shoulders and kissed the top of her head. "That's right. And you know what else? No thief can steal our future."